All right, we're back. Tasty Crypto Show. I'm Ryan Grace. With me today, across from me, Katie McGarrigle, Wizard Katie, Jedi Katie,
Viking Katie,
Ninja Katie.
Hell yeah. I'm not ninja yet.
Okay,
aspire to be. But
aspiring ninja.
Yeah, and also bad trader Katie.
Bad trader Katie.
As the markets have indicated. Crazy day. Do you have adrenal fatigue?
No, not really.
No? You just live in a constant state of just like depleting your cortisol at every level? Because I feel like I do that too.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, most of my positions for some time, I need to get back into trading, honestly. I haven't really been an active trader as much as I used to be. So most of my positions are all like just in crypto, long-term investments.
Sure.
And I'm fortunate enough to be in it at like lower levels where I think sometimes as a result, like, you know, I look at Bitcoin, I think we're still up double digits in the last year.
Yeah.
So when you have some of that performance, then the swings from 100 to 80 or 70 or wherever we are right now, they don't feel as bad. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, I'm long ETH at much higher prices here. We're going to talk about ETH in just a second today. But I have an iron gut, I guess, a stomach for the volatility.
Yeah.
It was fun last night, though, when it opened and into the close on Friday as well.
Yeah.
I'm ready to jump back in.
Are you?
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because Bar Rescue is a show that is watched in my household. It's not to my... I don't like it. I don't like John Taffer. Sorry.
It's where they come
as if John Taffer's watching.
They fix a bar, like help it become profitable or whatever.
Yeah, but nothing. My anxiety last night was listening to John Taffer talk about how disgusting someone's kitchen is, and then you pile on Spoos being down 180 on top of it, and I was just sleeping like this.
Yeah, how are you doing today?
We're good.
Okay.
We're hanging in there. I mean, like you said, I think it's just interesting because when I was first learning how to trade, for several years, there was no volatility. And then 2020 happened, and then 2021 happened, and then there was kind of a little bit of a lull, like maybe some geopolitical stuff. And then now it feels like 2020 again.
Yeah, Liberation Day.
Yes. And so, I think the most important thing that we talk about day in and day out is controlling your size. And luckily, I'm still a pretty small size trader, so I'm relatively okay. But it's wild to watch the markets just rip and dip, and yeah, it's crazy. And we've got a ton of people watching, so shout out to them. Hopefully, they're in the same boat. Maybe not. Maybe they're having better trades than we are.
Shout out to the chat. If you're not streaming this on YouTube, get over to YouTube. Tasty Live is the channel, of course. Type something crazy shit into the chat. We love to see it. Thanks for everybody showing up here today. If you have any questions, we'll try our best to address them to the best of our ability, I suppose, during the show. I'm happy to go anywhere, Katie. We can throw up charts looking at the S&P, VIX. Obviously, we saw some volatility levels that we haven't seen in quite some time, like you mentioned, which makes it hard to stay small when the VIX is 60, right? And the S&P is whipping around 4% intraday. Even the micros are pretty big. But let's run through our crypto-related charts here. If you caught OTCL earlier today, this will be a little bit of a rerun around some of the performance. Obviously, not much has changed intraday. You got a little bit of a bounce. I want to talk about Ethereum as well. Ethereum is down like 60% in 3 months.
Yeah.
How do we think about it? I'm calling this sad ETH. So I want to look at it from the kind of historical perspective, and then kind of just go anywhere you want. But
that's great.
Yeah.
Because I think, I'm still new to this, right? Like I really only started to mess with this when you and I first started the show together in the late fall. I've got a little bit of Bitcoin, a little bit of ETH, a little bit of Solana, a couple of shitcoin types of things, but I'm still a baby when it comes to this. So I would love to hear the story of why ETH is sad.
Oh, well, it's sad because it's down 60%.
Well, on top, what are the factors that is layering into that?
Absolutely. And I got to shout out Theta Trader here, lunatic feces in the chat. I like that. That is that's some crazy shit.
A little fun play on words there.
Absolutely.
All right.
Let's throw up the slides, please. And Let's take a look. There's you and me, Katie.
Oh yeah, look at little roller coaster.
Yeah.
Do you like roller coasters?
I do. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, Cedar Point. Shout out to Sandusky, Ohio.
I've never been.
Oh, it's awesome.
I've never been. I mean, I've done like all the other, like just major like spots or whatever, but I've never done Cedar Point.
Okay. I haven't been there in probably a decade.
Yeah.
Time to go back. We'll have
I
to
know.
do a little tasty trip.
I think though, like the one thing that's always funny is like when you're in the lines for those types of things. First off, like, does everybody just have to pay for a fast pass now in order to not wait for like 3 hours for one ride?
I guess so. I didn't know of that, or maybe it's always been a thing, but I wasn't aware of it being a thing before when I was going.
Yeah,
So
but
I would pay now though.
yeah, I haven't been on any roller coasters in a while. The last ones I were on were like at Harry Potter World or Wizarding World.
Okay, yeah. Of course.
And frankly, I was a little concerned because I got like really dizzy afterwards, and I'm like, oh man, am I like developing like an inner ear thing and my like older age? Could be. So I hope I still like roller coasters.
Well, this summer you got to get to Cedar Point.
Oh my God, yes. Okay. Group trip, tasty trip.
I'm down.
All right. We can always go to Great America too, right around the block, up a couple, just to the north of us.
It's been years. I'll go wherever.
Hell yeah. Love it.
We are on a roller coaster right now. Let's take a look at the market here. I've got a slightly lower spot price for Bitcoin at 78.8. But when we put this together, 79,000 red across the board with the exception of XRP on a relative basis year to date versus Bitcoin. It is up slightly. Realized vols have come down a little bit, Katie, but still elevated. ETH vol popped up into the 80s here today. We'll take a look at that in just a second. Nothing has changed here. A couple weeks ago, we saw what looked like possibly a transition from bearish to neutral and then slammed right back down. I think one thing I would note is that we are still relatively constructive on longer term timeframes. And I think when you look at Bitcoin, it's held up to some extent versus, certainly the rest of the crypto market, and is held up in the face of some of this crazy volatility we've seen in equities, but it has been trading lower since February.
Yeah.
Coming back down to what was around the prior high from the last cycle, or from where we were when we broke out ahead of the election. So that'll put you down in the low 70s, which is what's implied by the expected move. So let's take a look at that. Bitcoin 79,000, ETH 1,500, Litecoin 72. The rest of them up here, Solana hanging on to $100 right now. But you just look at the 3-month performance in here, and it's been absolutely terrible. That said, this is par for the course in crypto. Live by the sword, die by the sword. You do experience these levels of volatility at times, which we'll focus on here in just a second. This is nothing new.
Okay. Yeah, taking a little bit of heat in my very baby crypto positions. So, all right, here we got expected moves. Okay, talk me through this.
Yeah, nothing out of the ordinary here. These are actually a little bit lower in percentage terms when you look at it. For Bitcoin, ETH, right around a little bit over a 10% move here. But Bitcoin has you going back down to 73 on the downside. 85 on the upside is the current weekly expected move, and that's just going to take the spot price and the current implied volatility. Same thing for ETH. So we are, again, short-term, intermediate-term bearish here. There's no way around it. We've got 1407 on the downside for ETH, 1700 on the upside. So if you've been following this week over week, these ranges have been moving lower, obviously, with price, but smaller expected moves now, given the volatility hasn't popped too much and the price has come down. Looking for a $14, $15 move in Solana, low end of the range, takes you back underneath 100. That said, this can all change in an instant, and we had a flash of that earlier today.
Yeah.
Headline came out. I think there was an interview on TV that was maybe misinterpreted, but they ran the headline on Twitter, and it was basically 90-day pause in tariffs, and you saw the response in the market.
Oh, yeah.
Like 8%.
The whole desk
move.
just went from being like relatively silent and not somber isn't the right word, but to all of like it was palpable.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin went back to 81 or so. So I think you kind of have a sense of what the response is going to look like should you get some relief there on that headline risk front. It's just whether that comes anytime soon or not is really the question. I personally don't think that this is going to last forever. Could there be a lot more downside in the meantime? Absolutely. But I do think that you probably get some negotiations. You probably see those headlines. And that's what makes this market really tough, too, because when you have the VIX at 60 or 50, you're going to have these massive intraday moves. And as much as the short trade has worked, you're susceptible to just that face ripper of a rally that could happen in an instant. So it's a challenging environment, to say the least. But these are the expected moves that we go off of. If you are buying the dip, I would look to just take a little bit off the table. If you do see this trade back up into the top end of any of these ranges, right? If I bought 70s, low 70s, mid 70s earlier, and I get that ripper today, or we see this trade higher, unless something has structurally changed and we see that in the signals, I would look to unload some of that position.
Okay.
Cover shorts at the downside of the range.
Okay. So something that we've talked about in the past is that, and I'm not trying to paraphrase your words, but like we have equated like elements of trading gold with elements of trading, particularly Bitcoin. And obviously, like gold has been on like a massive run. Obviously, a couple of days of correction here, just kind of following what else is going on in the market. But like, you would never say, and it's clearly evident in this moment at least, that like crypto products are not safe haven products.
No, absolutely not.
Same way, even though you might call like crypto the digital gold, it's never going to be like a flight to quality safe haven type of product. Am I correct?
I think you're absolutely correct. I think you could see Bitcoin as a flight to safety within the crypto market, if you want to look at it that way,
Sure.
from a kind of volatility perspective, and that's indicated by Bitcoin market cap dominance at 63 or so right now. But this is how I would think about it, right? The digital gold analogy is just an easy way to explain Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's a starting point for a lot of people that are new to what this is, right? Because there's still people that struggle with like, I can't hold it, I can't touch it, it's not real, what is it good for, et cetera, et cetera. It's a value transfer mechanism on the internet. So I think intrinsically that's valuable, but without getting too far into the weeds, it has similar characteristics to gold. So people call it digital gold. But when you think about how this trades in the market, I think you almost have to kind of flip it upside down. People think of gold as a commodity. Trades a lot more like a currency. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin is called a cryptocurrency. It trades a lot more like a commodity.
Yeah.
So when you look at what drives gold prices, historically, and I think it's true when we look at what's going on here today in terms of almost at all-time highs, pulling back off of the top there, gold is a non-yield bearing asset. So gold trades off of rates, real yields specifically, so discounting for inflation. So when you have falling real yields, gold tends to do pretty well. When you look at it as a currency priced in dollars and the dollar is weakening, gold tends to do pretty well.
Right.
In this macro environment, it's absolutely and should come as of no surprise that gold is trading as well as it's trading for those exact reasons. Now, on the flip side, Bitcoin can benefit from liquidity in the marketplace. It can benefit from lower interest rates, zero interest rates, open market operations out of the Fed, but it's not gold. It just is never traded like that. It's a high beta risk asset. I would think of it more like a long duration tech stock.
Sure.
So this does well as a currency debasement hedge over long periods of time. Gold might do well in the same way. But in a market where you see the VIX go from 20 to 50,
Yeah. There's nowhere really to hide.
no, like I don't think like let's buy Bitcoin. I don't think that's the trade. I think again, longer term, what this has benefited from has been zero interest rate policy, open market operations. The Fed's buying treasury bonds, it's buying mortgages. You're seeing the balance sheet expansion, you're seeing purchasing power declines. And so this isn't something where even from the inflation perspective, you say, oh, CPI was higher last month and Bitcoin should be higher. Absolutely not.
Right.
This is a hedge to currency debasement, and not just dollar debasement, but you look at this globally as a hedge too. I think there's reasons to own it as a hard asset.
Right.
But in a volatile market environment, it's going to get smoked as it has in this environment.
Yeah. Well said.
So,
Sub-Zero says Bitcoin's going to 69,000. Not out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, it easily could, right?
Yeah.
I think, again, this is an asset that trades at a 60, 70 vol, and sometimes much, much higher. So, yeah, it could go to 60. and it could go, I think the trade is probably somewhere between 50 and 150. If it's $100,000, that's the way that I would think about it.
Right. Yeah, like
given
looking
its
right
volatility.
now, looking at the options chains right now, it's like 45% probability of touch, 69,000.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great stuff. Okay. Thank you for answering that, because I think that that's been something that, when everything is happening in the way that it's been happening, you start to just kind of question and pick apart your toolbox. What's been working? What hasn't been working? Where should I be considering that I might not be fully considering? So I thought it was kind of an appropriate time to clarify, what you meant when you said that. And I think your description of describing it almost like the opposite of a commodity, or behaving more like a commodity, and gold actually behaving more like a currency, is really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would think about it, at least. Yeah, and I see Eric's saying, isn't the balance sheet shrinking? Absolutely. We've been undergoing quantitative tightening, so balance sheet reduction as a result of that. I think, assets in general are forward-looking, and so there will be a point in time where we get out of this macro environment, and let's kind of put tariffs aside. I think you get some resolution there, some clarity around something. But you move forward into one that maybe is more stagflationary, right? Whatever that looks like, getting out of this environment should be generally a positive for crypto. Bitcoin historically has done well in those environments. This one, not so much. And that's true of the NASDAQ as well.
Yeah. So tell me then a little bit more about ETH.
Yeah, so let's we'll jump.
Sad child, puppy.
So, ETH has just been absolutely destroyed over the last few months here. It's down 57% right now. It's down over 25% in the last month. It's down over 50% year to date, down 50% on a one-year basis. So I thought for today's show, Katie, last 10 minutes that we have here, we would just look at this in more detail. Is 50% on a yearly basis out of the ordinary?
Yeah. Should I be buying the dip?
I know
we just talked through it, but carry on.
Look, I think there's some indicators that you probably have very oversold conditions. Does that mean that today, right here, right now, you should buy it? I don't know. You're closer to the bottom, I think, than not. But, could you trade back under 1,500? Maybe. I don't know. I think with some of this stuff, and I mentioned this earlier on the network, it's like if you're playing for the long term, and I don't know if that's a year, it's 2 years, whatever, it's not as relevant if you buy Bitcoin at 72 or 70 or 69 or whatever it might be. Not if you're trading this short term, absolutely. But longer term, you're probably less price sensitive. That said, how do we think about this? So sad ETH, has experienced a 50% or more drawdown in 7 of the last 9 years. And absolutely, we need to take into consideration the fact that 9 years ago, the nominal value of ETH was a lot lower than 1,500.
Yeah.
So take that into consideration. But when we just look at this in percentage terms, how frequently does this happen? Is this like a once in a decade event where the price of ETH crashes by 50%? If that happened in the S&P, you would say absolutely. But in ETH, it seems to happen all the time. In crypto, this stuff goes down 80%, goes up 400%. I don't know. It's extremely volatile.
Yeah.
I think you see that change. It matures. It evolves over time. But this has happened quite a bit. So 7 of the last 9 years, we've seen a 50% or more decline in the price. What happens after the fact? Doesn't mean that it's going to happen in the future, but what have we observed? 1 month doesn't really do anything. Maybe it goes lower. You need to give this some time. These things crash, then they base, they consolidate, and then maybe there's a catalyst that goes higher. But what's interesting to me about this is that on average, after this occurs, it goes up.
Yeah.
No surprise, right? And that doesn't help anybody that owned it at much higher prices, but it's violent to the upside just as well. And I think speaks to, okay, how do you think about the current move? If you weren't in the trade, is there an opportunity here? Possibly, because when it goes down by this much, on average, on a 3-month basis, it returns about 30%. You look at that on a longer time horizon, you look at that into the back half possibly of this year, and a lot can change from now to then. Mm-hmm. On average, this has gone up 100%. It's doubled in price. So could we get back from 1,500 to 3,000 by the end of the year? I think that's completely within the realm of possibilities. So just wanted to look at this and try to put some context around the move. Got a few more slides just to run through here. You think about, okay, 50% drawdown, that's very, very volatile. So what is Ethereum's annualized volatility by year? Go back to 2020. Here's where we are, 23, stuck in the mud. That was post FTX collapse. Crypto markets bottomed out and just traded sideways as they do.
Yeah.
And so I think it's encouraging that we're seeing more volatility. A lot of times we see bigger upside moves in some of this stuff than we do downside moves. So you want to see that observed when you look at volatility. So we are right now running at a 67% annualized vol, and that's picked up from 23, but we're nowhere near where we were when you were really ripping higher last time. I think we got to 4,500, close to it, in 2021. It also has a lot of potential for outsized returns, and that's what I think is attractive about this asset class. Like, again, live by the sword, die by the sword. You have to have a stomach for the volatility, and we're not going to shy away from that. But this has a tail, and it's a right tail.
Yeah.
And so you look at, again, you go back, okay, you had much lower nominal prices at times. So I'm talking about something going up, 100%. It could have gone from 800 to 1,600, like entirely possible. But we do observe that there's a high frequency of these larger upside moves. And sometimes there's these, much bigger upside moves than the downside moves, right? We don't have any, and these are weekly percentage returns. So you have some that are, 40, 50, 60% in just a week. Not calling for that by any means, but
I love the smirk on your face.
It's what we've seen in the past. Well, it's just, this is what I love about this asset is because there is this degree of asymmetry, especially if you can get into a trade, and it's tough. If you had everything in this at 3,000, you don't have anything left.
Yeah, you can't load the boat necessarily.
But if you have cash to put to work or you were trading around in here, that's the thing that, I love about this stuff. And I'm not saying that this is true of every crypto asset, but, you see something similar in the return profile of Bitcoin, of Ethereum, of Solana. Some of this hasn't been around that long. But looking at ETH, right, there is a right tail.
Yeah. Okay.
Couple more for you before we wrap things up. So just looking at, and this is, again, the weekly performance. We're going back over the last 3 years, trying to remove some of those lower nominal prices. And you look at, the biggest weekly returns and the worst weekly returns. So the best and worst weekly returns here. And so you can see that over the last 3 years, probably a bit of a normal distribution to some extent, as you might expect. But you can see 25, 30% in a week, just like we've witnessed here recently to the downside. Some of these coming recently, if you go back to the beginning of March here, 2025, almost 20% down for the week.
Yeah.
Looking at just this year, here's where we are. So here's that move that I was talking about, and then, putting weekly moves in perspective, some of what we've seen recently, just this week for the most part, right? Down on almost another 15%. So recently the downside moves have been a lot larger than the upside moves, but again, over time, there's certainly the potential for some outsized gains in ETH.
But like you're saying, I mean, if you are, I think the thing that I'm picking up from doing this with you is just, you need to be able to have an iron gut and or build tolerance towards an iron gut and or be okay with weathering some volatility. One way to approach that is to not load the boat at one price at one time. Think about small incremental purchases, nibbles, whatever you want to call them, as time just goes out. And also, for me personally, being an options and futures trader in a shorter time frame, I saw somebody in the chat said something about like learning trading on a dedicated show. I do that already, but I like this and talking to you about this so much because this is like the investment area that I just haven't really even scratched the surface on as much, just because I've been so indoctrinated is not the right word, but like I grew up trading with Tom and Tony on this show for the past 12 years now, which is insane. So I'm just loving thinking about approaching my time horizons a little bit differently than I think I have learning how to trade futures and futures options.
Yeah, and I think you want to diversify in that sense across time frames and not just across asset classes or even in terms of like your approach to trading, right? You want to do some futures trading, you want some longer term investments, you want some option strategies, obviously. You probably don't want to go as crazy as me and kind of jump in
head Matrix
first here. Yeah, I do think this is a big macro trade, but macro trades take a long time. This has been for me a multi-year trade, to say the least. But I think when you look at the return profile here, and we've talked about this as it applies to Bitcoin, but you want some of this in your portfolio. And I don't know what that allocation looks like for everybody. Maybe it's 1%, it's 0.5%, it's 5%. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think, again, given the return profile and the uncorrelated, for the most part, right? Certainly when we see these types of volatility or these types of moves in the market, you're not going to be immune from that in crypto at all. Quite often you see that crypto is going to front run that. But just given the potential for the upside and the uncorrelated nature of it, I think you want some of this at this stage in your portfolio. And when you look for those opportunities to add to those positions, maybe it is waiting until you get that 50%, 60% drawdown. And could it go down a bit more? Absolutely. But historically, these have been decent entry points for trades or for investments. If you're looking at holding onto this for, like we showed, 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year.
More plus.
Yeah. But the key is you want to harvest gains at times too, right? If this thing is going to trade 15 to 3 or 2 to 4 in terms of the range, and you were buying some at 2,000, maybe it goes a lot higher. I don't know. But if it does get to 4, probably want to take some profits.
Fair enough. All right, last really quick question for you. Just knowing the volatility and everything we're kind of experiencing just across every market, liquidity pools right now, are you participating? Are you hands off because there's just too much velocity? What is your approach there?
I'm participating, but in the sense that most of my pools, I think all of my pools on this recent move are out of range.
Got it.
Yeah, so I'm long ETH versus coming in initially 50% dollars, 50% ETH and making markets in there via that mechanism. Happy with, I guess, not happy with that, but fine holding the ETH position, and let's see if we get a bounce or some of these pools go back in range and activate again, but not managing them. I think that's another way to approach this, right? You limit your upside in the same way that you limit your upside with a covered call. But if you want to enter the market here and you're thinking, okay, 1,500 is a decent level, and I might make my range 1,000 and 2,000 on the upside, so $500 aside, the volatility that's occurring and the trading volumes in here should be pretty lucrative for those pools. It just sucks if you had a pool like I did where my ETH price was like, I think the bottom of my range was probably like 1,800.
Okay.
And you blow up, overnight, last night, it goes down to 1,400 or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm hanging on to the position, but yeah, I think this is an environment in which like you're implicitly short vol and you want to take advantage of high trading volumes. That's not any different than like, hey, the VIX is at 60 and I want to sell a strangle. Okay, well, that could present an opportunity, but you need to be aware that this thing is going to move. It's not a 60 vol for no reason.
You're not selling a straddle, let's just say.
I mean, it's not like, I'm selling high IV and it's not going to move around. No, you're going to get 3 to 4% intraday moves. Yeah. So you have to be aware of that. But yeah, definitely, I think there's opportunities for it right now.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for the explanation.
Yeah, thank you.
To be determined what I shall do as I approach ETH the next go around. But thank you for everybody else in the chat watching. Lots of new people the last couple of days. We really appreciate all the support that we're getting. And stick around. Subscribe to the channel. Come to the site. Head to Tasty Trade. Job security, y'all. Job security.
Hell yeah. We'll be back on Wednesday. Until then, I'm Ryan.
I'm Katie.
Peace.
Peace.